In 1960s small-town America, there was an unspoken rule. You never showed up to someone's house empty-handed. Whether it was a pie, a mason jar of jam, or fresh cucumbers from your backyard garden, you brought something. It wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about respect, about community. The kitchen table was sacred ground where coffee was poured without asking, and you didn't wait to be invited to sit, you just did, because you were home. If someone's porch light was on after 9 p.m., it meant something was wrong, and neighbors came over to check. And when a funeral happened, the casserole brigade assembled instantly. Nobody asked, nobody scheduled, it just happened. You didn't thank people with texts, you wrote thank you notes by hand. And in a small town, one unwritten rule was clear. If you were sick, your lawn got mowed anyway. No one ever admitted who did it. You just woke up and it was done.
In those days, if you saw someone driving a new car, you didn't envy them, you congratulated them. People walked over, peered inside, tapped the fenders, and gave sincere compliments. "She's a beauty," was a real thing people said, with zero sarcasm. And if you ever broke down on the side of the road, before you even opened the hood, someone had already pulled over. You didn't lock your doors, not at home, and definitely not in your car. If you forgot your keys in the ignition at the local grocery, you'd probably find a note on your windshield. "Left your lights on, neighbor." Kids waved at passing cars, and drivers waved back, every time. If you sat in someone's car, you adjusted nothing, not the mirrors, not the seat. And if a teenager borrowed a family car, they always returned it washed, vacuumed, and with a full tank, even if gas was just 29 cents a gallon.
Back then, borrowing sugar wasn't just a phrase. It was part of the town's circulatory system. You could walk next door with a measuring cup and walk out with flour, eggs, or a smile. Front doors stayed unlocked, and the back door was where friends entered. If a kid acted up at the diner, they got a stern glance not just from mom, but from every booth around. Strangers corrected each other's kids, and no one took offense. At the grocery store, you greeted the cashier by name. You waited your turn, even if it took a while, because nobody was in that much of a hurry. People stood when an elder entered the room. You didn't ask, "Do you need help?" You just helped. And if someone dropped something, 10 people bent down to grab it. These weren't rules written in a book. They were carved into daily life, passed from glance to glance, nod to nod.
There was an art to small-town greetings. You didn't just nod, you stopped. Whether at the post office, the barber shop, or the hardware store, a hello often became a 10-minute catch-up. You didn't interrupt, you waited your turn to speak. And gossip? It was an art form, carefully woven with kindness. People knew everything, but they didn't weaponize it. If someone's kid got in trouble, the town whispered, "He'll turn out okay." There was grace in the way people believed in each other. If you had a flat tire on Main Street, the barber shop emptied out to help. And once you were back on the road, someone from the diner came out and handed you a coffee, no charge. These weren't grand gestures. They were subtle, soft-spoken signs of care. The rule was simple. If you saw someone struggling, you stepped in, even if you didn't know them.
Sundays had their own quiet rules. You wore your best clothes, not to impress, but to show respect. After church, people didn't rush home. They lingered on the steps, kids playing tag, adults talking about crops, weather, and the county fair. You never honked your horn near a church, and if a funeral procession passed by, you pulled over and stood silent, hand over heart, hat removed. If someone got married, the whole town knew. Neighbors lined the street with tin can rattles tied to the bumper. And Sunday dinner, that was sacred. Fried chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans cooked with bacon, served on real plates with cloth napkins. You didn't watch TV during dinner, and no one left the table until Grandma said so. It was about honoring the moment, the people, the peace of that one slow day. A rhythm of respect, no words needed,
Everyone just knew.
In 1960s small-town America, no one ever rang the doorbell at dinner time. That was sacred. You just knew 5 to 6 p.m. was family time. Even salesmen avoided it. And if someone did come by, you offered them a plate without hesitation. There were no cell phones, no texting, "I'm outside." You just knocked, or better yet, walked in. And when someone had a new baby, the entire town became a support system. Meals showed up unasked. Rocking chairs appeared on porches. Everyone lowered their voices out of respect. You didn't have to tell people what you needed. They figured it out. During storms, neighbors checked your windows. After surgeries, someone always shoveled your walk. People didn't say, "Let me know if I can help." They helped. It was a quiet choreography, a kind of emotional muscle memory that everyone knew the steps without being taught.
Every neighborhood had an unofficial watch system. Not cameras, not alarms, just watchful eyes and good hearts. Mrs. Peterson from 2 houses down always knew which kids skipped school. Mr. Glenn on the corner saw who walked home with whom, and no one got away with much. But this wasn't surveillance, it was care. If your bike chain broke, someone appeared with a wrench. If your dog got loose, a neighbor had him tied up and waiting with a bowl of water. Birthday parties weren't private invites, they were open-door events. Whole blocks came together. Folding chairs appeared like magic, and someone always brought potato salad. And when your parents weren't home, the rule was simple. Any adult could act like your mom or dad, whether it was praise or punishment. Nobody questioned it. We didn't need apps to stay connected. We had each other.
Kids in the 60s were expected to be seen and heard, but respectfully. You said yes, ma'am, and no, sir, even to people you knew all your life. You didn't speak with food in your mouth, and you never talked back, not unless you wanted a stare that could melt steel. At the local diner, kids sat quietly with a soda and coloring sheet. And if an adult entered the room, you stood up. Didn't matter who they were. You held the door open for women, for elders, and even for strangers. That was just how it was. If you swore in public, you were shunned by every adult within earshot. And if your shirt was untucked at Sunday service, your aunt would fix it without saying a word. There was a shared understanding. You represent your family, not through words, through your behavior. Phone calls had invisible boundaries. After 9 p.m., the phone didn't ring, unless it was bad news. And when it did, everyone froze. Kids knew not to interrupt if mom was on the phone. And when someone passed the phone to you, you said, "Hello, this is your name speaking." Long-distance calls were expensive, so they were short and chosen carefully. You didn't call during dinner, and you never called during Sunday service. Party lines existed, so conversations weren't always private, but no one gossiped about what they overheard. That was another unspoken rule. You pretend you didn't hear. If you needed to talk privately, you cupped your hand over the receiver and whispered. Phones weren't distractions, they were tools. Measured, respectful, rare. And when someone picked up, the first words weren't, "What's up?" but, "How are you today?" School wasn't just about learning. It was about respect. You stood when the teacher walked in. You didn't speak unless spoken to. And if you forgot your homework, you didn't give excuses, you owned it. Teachers were pillars of the community. If you saw your teacher at the store, you greeted them with a, "Good afternoon, Mrs. Taylor," never just "Hi." Desks were wooden, floors were polished, and chalk dust filled the air. And when the bell rang, no one ran in the halls. You lined up quietly. You walked home in groups. And you never disrespected the flag. Everyone stood for the pledge, hand on heart, eyes forward. Even if you didn't understand every word, you said it proudly. School lunch was eaten without complaints, and if you forgot yours, someone shared. That's just how it was. No policies, just practice. No enforcement, just expectation.
In 1960s small towns, no one said, "I'm babysitting tonight." You just watched the neighbor's kids. If mom had errands or dad was at work, someone down the street simply stepped in. Teenagers didn't charge for babysitting. They did it because it was part of growing up. And when kids misbehaved, you didn't need a phone call home. By the time you got there, your parents already knew. News traveled faster than any hotline. You could walk into a neighbor's house and know exactly where the Band-Aids were or where the cookies were hidden. Homes had different smells: cinnamon, tobacco, pine sol, and each one told a story. You could tell who'd just baked bread, who'd just cleaned their floors, and who was making Sunday stew. You didn't need directions. Every kid knew the layout of every house on the block. That's just how close we were.
There was an unspoken rule about front porches. They weren't for decoration. They were for sitting. Every evening, families gathered there. Dad with a glass of iced tea, Mom with her sewing, kids playing on the steps. If a neighbor walked by, you didn't wave from the screen, you invited them up. Porches were extensions of the living room, but without the TV. People watched the sunset, talked about the garden, or just rocked in silence. It was where you cooled off after a long day, where stories were told, where first kisses sometimes happened. And every porch had a creaky step. It was part of the charm. You didn't rush it, you didn't replace it. And when someone drove by, they slowed down just to wave. A simple lift of the hand. That's all it took to say, "I see you, we're neighbors."
If you borrowed something, you returned it in better shape than you got it. That was the rule. Borrowed a lawnmower, you filled the tank and cleaned the blades. Used someone's casserole dish, you returned it with a slice of pie inside. You never returned an empty dish. And you always said thank you, not with words, but with action. People left eggs on each other's doorsteps, or bundles of rhubarb, or a warm loaf of banana bread. All unspoken gestures of gratitude. If you broke something, you fixed it. If you lost it, you replaced it. No one had to remind you. It was just what was expected. And somehow, everyone knew. Kids were taught this early. Leave things better than you found them. That applied to tools, toys, and friendships, especially friendships. A handshake meant more than a contract. And your word, that was ironclad.
You knew your mailman's name. You probably knew where his kids went to school. And he knew if someone in your house was sick or deployed or just had a baby. The mailman was more than a delivery guy. He was a thread in the town's fabric. He didn't just deliver mail, he delivered news, presents, comfort. He noticed things. If newspapers piled up, he told a neighbor. If a letter looked urgent, he walked it to the door. You offered him lemonade in the summer, coffee in the winter, and during Christmas, he got more cookies than Santa. No one tipped, they thanked, and that meant more. He was part of the rhythm, like the church bells or the town siren. You could set your watch by him. Rain, snow, or heat, your mail came. And with it, a familiar face that made you feel everything was okay.
At the heart of every small town was a barber or a diner, and both followed the same unspoken rules. You didn't rush, you didn't talk politics unless invited, and you always respected the regulars. At the diner, you had your booth, and if someone was sitting there, you waited with a smile, not a complaint. The waitress knew your order before you spoke. Coffee came in thick white mugs, and refills were silent, automatic, and bottomless. At the barber shop, men waited quietly with newspapers. Boys sat up straight when their names were called. You didn't scroll. You observed. You listened. These places weren't just businesses. They were anchors, sanctuaries, living, breathing memory banks. And everyone knew you don't take the last piece of pie unless the waitress offers it twice. It was never written, but it was always understood.
In 1960s small-town America, everyone knew that if you were walking and a car pulled over, you offered help, not suspicion. You didn't look away,
You leaned in, asked if they were lost or needed directions. Strangers were greeted with kindness first, not caution. If a woman's bag fell in the street, 5 people stopped to help, and at least one stayed until she smiled. If someone dropped coins at the store, every last penny was picked up and returned. Kids opened doors for elders without being told. And if a man tipped his hat at a passing lady, she'd nod with a soft smile. That was just common decency. It wasn't about manners written on a chalkboard. It was a rhythm of small kindnesses, a silent agreement. I've got you, neighbor. And the best part? Nobody thought it was special because everyone did it.
Every small town had a do not cut line rule. At the butcher, the bakery, the soda fountain, lines weren't policed, they were honored. You knew where to stand, how to wait, and when to nod forward with a, "You go ahead." If someone had a baby in arms or an older parent beside them, they went first, no argument. Kids didn't complain about waiting, they learned patience by watching adults model it. If someone dropped $1, the next person tapped their shoulder and handed it back. No reward expected. And if someone brought exact change to pay, you admired their preparation. Being polite was a kind of quiet pride. It was how you showed you were raised right, not by yelling it, but by living it. Every day, in every line, in every little moment. At potlucks and community dinners, everyone brought something, even if it was just paper plates. No one showed up empty-handed, and no one bragged about what they made. The dishes were set out on long folding tables, covered with mismatched cloths, and no one touched a bite until grace was said. Even the kids. You didn't take the last scoop unless you asked, "Did everyone get some?" And when the meal ended, people stayed to help clean, even if they were guests. You packed leftovers for the widow down the street without needing to be asked. The host never washed dishes alone. It was one of those beautiful, unwritten rules. If you eat together, you clean together. And somehow, no one needed to say it. It was just what you did.
You didn't brag. That was a big one. In small-town life, humility was respected more than success. If you got a promotion or bought something new, you didn't announce it. You waited for others to notice. And when they did, you shrugged and said, "Oh, just got lucky." Compliments were deflected, not absorbed. Kids were taught to say thank you, not "I know." Modesty wasn't about false humility, it was about dignity. If someone helped you, you returned the favor quietly. If you won something, you shared credit. And if you did something wrong, you admitted it. Loud apologies weren't needed. A sincere look and fixing the mistake was enough. Reputation mattered, but not in a flashy way. It was earned slowly, day by day, choice by choice. And everyone knew the loudest guy in the room wasn't the most respected. The quiet one who showed up was.
There was a shared silence at sunset. As the sky turned amber, people stepped out onto porches, front yards, or sidewalks, not to talk, but to breathe. Children played a little softer, dogs lay down, radios were turned low. It was the unspoken end to the day, not marked by alarms or reminders, but by light. Some neighbors sat on swings, others on stoops, a few with coffee cups or quiet smiles. No appointments, no plans, just presence. If a neighbor walked by, they didn't rush. They slowed, nodded, maybe stopped for a few words, maybe not. There was comfort in that shared stillness, a final exhale before bedtime. It wasn't on the calendar. No one texted, "Come outside." You just knew. Because back then, even nature had its own place in the rhythm of community life.
Thanks for walking with us through the quiet, forgotten rhythms of everyday life in mid-century America. If any of these memories stirred something in you, you're not alone. The world may have changed, but the values that built it still matter. Until next time, keep remembering back then.